been over 1 week now since we saw WWDC from Apple, and boy was there some news. From all the iOS to macOS to iPad updates, and even a sprinkling of a little bit of hardware, there was a lot that Apple gave us and a lot for us to talk about. So let's get into it. And they introduced that both in the Mac, what's it called? Mac Pro, Mac Air? Hello and welcome back. I'm super glad to have you here. And today we're going to go through all things WWDC. And for me, there really were 3 clear product and services themes that were rife throughout all of Apple's keynote. Some were interesting, some were even more interesting, but we're going to get through it all. Let's just run through quickly some of the highlights that we got from all the different OSs and everything else in between. We got updates to iOS in iOS 16, and really the main one was that lock screen customization, which we'll get into in detail. Customers can now change things like their fonts, they can add complications like weather and other things to the lock screen, and do something really funky with photos in bringing them to the fore and having the time right in the background. And that's something really cool, which I'm sure people will get behind. There was updates to iPadOS, and really specifically to the M1 iPad Air and iPad Pro. And in particular, those is where we had some losses but some wins. We got a great update to window management in Stage Manager, which we'll get into in detail. And that was also brought along to macOS, macOS Ventura, the new macOS. And finally, we got a minor updates to Apple Watch, and in particular, the watchOS fitness and what that means to people who really like to run. And really, there were 4 or 5 main features which people will get around, and we'll discuss those in detail. So let's really get into it. For me, first and foremost was Apple's clear steer to developers. Yes, this is WWDC, but there was a clear focus on developers and giving them a bird in the hand, something to really kickstart their development journey with the new OSs that Apple showed off today. And I haven't counted them, but I can almost guarantee with every new thing that Apple launched today, there was a WebKit or an SDK for developers to jump on the bandwagon. From things like weather to things like creating charts in Swift UI and everything in between. Usually those elements come out post an update from Apple, so the first party apps get them first and then they lend themselves to the third parties at a later date. But this time, Apple gave them out to developers right off the bat. And for me, it really is a show of faith and a show of thanks to Apple, to its developers to go, yes, we can create our own first party apps that are fantastic, but we know that our lifeblood, the App Store lifeblood, comes from developers. And we want you as developers to go out and make sure that you're developing apps for customers that they'll love. Even though the beta's only out, we've already seen funky things from developers to introducing weather into some applications that don't even have weather. Think like a medical app that shows weather, or things like a fitness app that also shows weather. There are really some integrations that are going to come to the fore. So well done to Apple for giving all the developers around the world the ability to go and create apps so that they're ready for the full rollout of iOS 16 when it launches later this year. Speaking of Apple giving back to its developers, Apple has also given back to its customers with the introduction of some really good personalization features. There's been a lot of commentary from all the different tech YouTubers to all the different commentators in the media around Apple's customization, from things like their messages customization to iPad customization, which we'll all get into shortly. But for me, it's not so much customization as it is personalization. We talked just before about iOS's update to the lock screen. Yes, you can customize it technically, but in typical Apple fashion, there are lots of nuances to how you can create that customization. And so for me, therefore, all the things which we're just about to go through are about personalization. So we touched on the lock screen already, but other things that are coming to both iOS, macOS, and iPadOS are messages updates. And for me, this is the thing I'm most excited about, the ability to mark messages unread. It's something I've been waiting for forever. Also, Apple's giving us the ability to edit messages. There's about a 15-minute window to do so, but it's a great ability if you've just spelt something incorrectly, or you've realized that I meant to say one thing and I've totally said the other thing once you read it back to yourself. So you've got a 15-minute window now to go and edit the message. And lastly, we can undo send from messages. And that is going to be a game changer. You just want to go ahead and delete something, or you send something to the wrong person. I know I've done that countless times. So all those features to messages are something which I know a lot of us have been screaming for, and again, Apple have given it back to us. In addition, Apple have given us the ability to share play in a number of different other apps. So they brought that to FaceTime with the latest iOS 15, but in iOS 16 they've enhanced that and given us the ability to share play in messages in addition to FaceTime. So now you don't have to actually start a FaceTime call to share something with someone. You can watch a video, you can do other things in share play all through messages. And that's also coming to the other suite of Apple products, first-party products, things like Keynote and Pages and Numbers, so you can work on documentation all live, message someone through the Messages app, a true integration of sharing different Apple applications. And I think if you think about us working from home more and that's becoming the norm, it's Apple's way of integrating more into our lives, into that productivity center, into that personalization center, similar to what Google and Microsoft all do today. That's one element. In addition to those personalizations, Apple has brought things to Apple Watch. So there wasn't a great watchOS update, but there were some key features for runners in particular. So more features, things like tracking your steps and how you step, other things which I'm particularly happy about, bringing fitness to Apple iPhones instead of just using an Apple Watch. So now you can track your steps and other elements, very minor things, but you don't have to have your Apple Watch with you wherever you go. You can do it from your phone. Again, it's another personalization feature to make that Apple ecosystem more yours. There are going to be a few honorable mentions at the end of the video, so stick around to hear them. A few other things of note: Apple's bringing freeform to FaceTime calls. This is their answer to Microsoft's whiteboard, and I know Zoom also has a whiteboard in them. So it's the idea that you can collaborate on this massive freeform board. You can bring in things like documentation, things like web pages, and other elements, things like footnotes and just notes in general. So you can really collaborate with all your different parties in your one space. And that's the idea of, again, creating a space, a personalization space for Apple to go and get things done. And the last thing to touch on from this personalization theme is Apple giving back to their iPad users. And that's the ability to do something called Stage Manager. So people have been crying out for a better way to window manage. We've got it in macOS, but it never really came to the fore in iPadOS. And now with Stage Manager, customers can actually go in and create elements just on the left and group like apps together. So imagine you're photo editing, you're looking at photos, you're doing something in Premiere, all those elements are grouped together, and you can actually have 4 on the left-hand side all at once. And now you can do 4 times 4. So you can really have 16 windows open all at once. And yes, there are some nuances, again, being Apple, you can't customize it, but it really does give the ability to drag and drop in between apps all on your screen all at once. The sad thing, unfortunately, is this is just solid to M1 iPads, but at the end of the day, Apple needs that additional horsepower, and they actually talk through in their keynote the ability to use CPUs as RAM, as storage, and Apple are only really able to do that with their M1 chips. So unfortunately, it won't be coming to the rest of our iPads, but it's really good for those power users, those pro users when they are managing the application. For me personally, I don't mind the way that multitasking is used today, and I'm happy to drag and drop across 2 windows or 3 if I can bring up the slide up. But at the end of the day, if you're a pro user and you really want to do drag and drop, you want to photo edit while dropping files and images into different things using your iPad, Stage Manager is the way to go. Just a short interruption. If you've been enjoying this content, be that good girl or guy and give this video a like and subscribe to my channel for more great content. Welcome back. So the third theme which you see throughout Apple's keynote was Apple again optimizing for growth. I'll link a video that I did earlier on about how Apple really wants to get into the services game even more and double down to make sure that their customers are getting the best bang for their buck from their products. But this is something different. Apple have now doubled down on even broader elements to the Apple ecosystem, which one may keep you in that Apple walled garden, but 2 are really making sure that their theme of being the head of the game in privacy comes to the fore in different elements of our lives. And I'll coin these things life admin in particular, but also other elements which we know Apple are getting into, even though they've been a bit hush-hush about. So let's start with the first one, which is Apple Later. This is Apple's foray into the buy now, pay later space. So we already have Apple Pay, an ability to send money in different apps from Apple itself. But this is the idea of purchasing something today and paying it in 4 installments, just like things like Afterpay and Zip Pay and other elements in your jurisdiction. This is Apple's foray into that same space. The beauty of this is, as what Apple has said, is that you don't actually have to change your API or configure anything else in your elements today, from your website to your applications. It'll just seamlessly work for you. which in true Apple fashion is perfect for their customers. You don't have to do anything, it just simply works. So yes, Apple already has an Apple Card, and as I mentioned, Apple Pay, etc. But this is really them entrenching their cash, their banking systems, all within our own lives. And it also gives the ability for users to say, hey, if you've got an Apple phone or other elements, we accept that. And then provides Apple's customers one additional element to accept Apple Pay. The second thing from a live admin perspective is what they've coined Passkey. And for me, this is super exciting. Working in some of the authentication spaces that I do, it's really hard for us as the custodians of presenting how important it is to authenticate yourselves and have great passwords to our users, and tell them it's not just about your password, it's about two-factor authentication, it's about ensuring that you have potentially a password manager to manage very complex passwords. And Apple has just stepped up the game. So this in general is the ability to use on-device biometrics instead of passwords. And that really opens up a whole new world. So instead of us remembering passwords, it's just using our face or using Touch ID. And that is a much better way to ensure that our details, our important things like banking and our emails potentially, if they're really, really important, remain secure and private to us. So well done to Apple and well done to Microsoft and Google for joining their journey. And the last thing is interesting from an Apple perspective, but not unheard of. And that's the introduction of CarPlay 2.0. And if you look at this, they've got some really great concepts, but it really is something which Apple hasn't done in the past. They haven't really shown things which are coming in FY23, which is a year and a half away from now, right now. So it's interesting from an Apple perspective to be showing us something so far ahead. There are two things in my mind why they may have done this. One is we just had at Google I/O, them as in Google introducing their tablet for FY23, and maybe this is Apple's way of saying if you can show something in the future, so can we. But I think there's something more there. Apple wants to be the custodians of your in-car entertainment, and by them introducing CarPlay 2.0, they're really showing all car retailers, don't worry about your UX and your design and how you present your UI to customers. We'll do it for you. Just have something to ingest our software and we'll make a beautiful experience. Not only will it be great for you as partnering with you, but it will be great for your customers because we know that iPhones are really widely spread, but we also know that they love CarPlay. We've saw from The Verge that they've reached out to, I think, about 12 different car manufacturers, and on the whole, most have said, yes, we want to support it, but we can't give you any details now. So we're not sure how that will work, but we do know that Apple is certainly in the car game. And you know what this means? I think an Apple car is coming. And now it's honorable mentions time. The first one, and really the big one, is Apple's hardware. They introduced the M2 chip, which is the next generation of their ARM processors. It's not as powerful or graphically powerful as the M1 Pro Max or Ultra, but it is that next step up. And they introduced that both in the MacBook Air and the MacBook Pro 13-inch. There was also a brand new design to the MacBook Air, and it's akin to what the MacBook Pro 14 and 16 inches look like in the current iteration. And the MacBook Pro is the exact same chassis. It's still got the touch bar, but it's got an M2 chip in. It's a slight upgrade, I think about 18% on M1, but it certainly is that cyclical thing which we've seen from Apple year on year. I suspect this will happen every single year. So next year around WWDC, we should see an M3 processor. The next one, which is my favorite, is Craig Federighi just running through the Apple Park looking like his best impression of David Hasselhoff on Baywatch Beach. Wow, Craig, well done. And the third one is we finally get a weather app on the iPad. There's no calculator app, but there is a weather app. Well done, Apple. Maybe next year we'll get a calculator app. Once again, if you've enjoyed this content, be that good person to give this a like and subscribe to my videos for more content. Thanks again, and as always, do that extra good little deed to bring a little light in the world. Until next time.